parts of Wales, parts of Devon and Cornwall, some damp areas to start here. And it's set to continue through much of the day. Still some quite heavy and blustery outbreaks, particularly across Scotland. Those central areas, parts of the southeast, any rain should eventually ease away, but it's still likely to remain quite cloudy. But it's still going to be fairly warm. Highs just about reaching the low 20s across the southeast. And it's still not going to be particularly cold either across the north, though obviously it's going to be quite a wet afternoon. Then heading into Friday, not quite as much rain, but it's still going to be damp at times. This system's slowly sinking its way southward, leading us to some drizzly outbreaks and potentially turning a little bit brighter across Scotland, Northern Ireland. There's still a risk of showers here, but it's going to feel quite warm, quite humid, and it's likely we'll see further outbreaks of rain, particularly on Saturday across northern areas, and still temperatures across the south in the low 20s.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Someone is going to win the biggest prize package to date, and that someone could be you, driving away in this Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. It has plenty of room for your family of 4, comes complete with kitchen, bathroom and all the space you'll need for life on the road. Plus, we'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Beth.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christys here.
I'm Michelle Duke, Britain's news channel.
News channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good evening to you and welcome to GB News Tonight with me, Martin Daubney, your host. So, London Mayor Sadiq Khan backs partial cannabis decriminalisation, stating that the policing of the drug actually causes greater harm to society. But what role does the drug play in violent crime in the UK? Tonight I'll be joined by a psychiatrist who says that the link between cannabis and violence is clear. And could former Reform MP Rupert Lowe be plotting to bring down the Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch with Robert Jenrick, who is rumoured to be her replacement? We'll be hearing straight from the horse's mouth. You'll not want to miss it. I'll be joined by Rupert Lowe on tonight's show. Plus,
By standard attire, a suit, a collar and tie. That would be inappropriate attire for those people, and they would find it extremely offensive.
A truly absurd story. A Labour councillor ties himself in knots, claiming that a shirt and tie dress code are offensive to ethnic and religious groups. That's right, shirts and ties are now racist, and I'll be joined by the Reform councillor who called him out. That's all coming on tonight's show. Well, Joe, pleasure to have your company. Sadiq Khan, many people say his policies have made London go to pot. Now he wants to decriminalise pot. Is that a good idea? Plus, talking of pots, what about plots? Is there a plot with Rupert Lowe to join the Conservative Party? Well, apparently there's been a secret tryst. There's been a meeting between Mr Lowe and Robert Jenrick. I'll be joined by Rupert Lowe on the show in a short while. You'll not want to miss that. Please get in touch usual way, gbnews.com/your say. But before we get into the show, your headlines, and here's Sam Francis.
Very good evening to you. The top story tonight at 7. Sir Keir Starmer has visited Liverpool today to meet police officers there after a car drove into crowds celebrating the city's football victory. We know that 7 people are still in hospital recovering. Police say they have also identified 79 who were injured in Monday's incident. A 53-year-old man remains in custody on suspicion of attempted murder, dangerous driving and drug driving. A fundraiser for victims has already topped 20,000. Sir Keir Starmer called the scenes awful and said it was vital that he saw the investigation firsthand.
No, thank you all for making time. It's really important for me to be here. The scenes on Monday were just awful to see how incredible joy and an amazing achievement turned to horror in a moment. And Steve, the Mayor's been keeping me informed and updated along with my team, but it's really important to be here to go through this firsthand with you. So thank you for making time and ensuring that I get to see the detail in the way that I'd like to.
Andrew and Tristan Tate have been charged with over 20 offences here in the UK, including rape, human trafficking and controlling prostitution. According to reports in The Telegraph, Andrew faces 10 charges against 3 women, his brother Tristan facing 11 linked to one of the same alleged victims. A European arrest warrant has been issued, but the pair must first face separate criminal proceedings in Romania. The Crown Prosecution Service warns the public not to share anything online that could prejudice the trial. Both brothers deny all charges in 2 countries. Russia says it is ready to put a peace deal on the table, offering Ukraine a settlement in Istanbul during talks on the 2nd of June. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov claims the document will lay out Moscow's full position on ending the war and tackling its so-called root causes. The Russian delegation will present the plan and offer clarifications, they say, in those direct talks. If it goes ahead, it would be the second round of resumed face-to-face negotiations between the 2 countries, but Ukraine has yet to respond. Top police and security chiefs are warning the government not to trade safety for space as early prisoner release plans are sparking alarm. In a joint call, leaders from the Met Police, MI5 and National Crime Agency all say the move risks public safety and demands serious investment to cope. They're warning that out of prison must not mean out of control. Heathrow's boss was asleep with his phone on silent as the airport shut down in March, a new review has found today. The CEO, Thomas Waldby, didn't find out about the emergency until nearly 6 hours after operations were suspended. That was due to a substation fire in the area. Alerts and calls failed to reach him overnight and over 270,000 passengers were grounded. The independent Kelly review says the right decisions were made under pressure, but calls for better emergency contact systems. Heathrow says it is acting on the report's recommendations. And Emma Raducanu is out of the French Open after a straight sets defeat to defending champion Iga Swiatek. The British #1 was overpowered 6-1, 6-2 in just over an hour. Swiatek dominated from the start, breaking Raducanu's serve 5 times and hitting 26 winners. It's the third time the Pole has reached round 3 without dropping a single set. But Raducanu will now turn her focus to Wimbledon, which starts in just over a month's time. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you in an hour. Now, though, it's over to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam, and welcome to GB News Tonight. With me, your host, Martin Daubney. Tonight's top story, the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, he's backed calls for the partial decriminalisation of cannabis possession after a study suggested that the policing of the drug caused a greater harm to society than its actual usage. Now, cannabis remains the largest part of the illegal drug market in the United Kingdom, which drives much of the violence in London. Between June 2023 and June 2024, over 16,000 of nearly 38,000 drug convictions were cannabis-related, with nearly 2,500 resulting in immediate custody. Now, the case of the triple killer Valdo Calacane, a diagnosed schizophrenic and triple killer, has renewed concerns over cannabis and mental health. And a King's College professor has warned that long-term heavy use may raise the risk of psychosis 6-fold, with critics fearing decriminalisation will harm public safety. Supporters argue it's a necessary step to reduce harm and to address racial disparities. Well, I'm delighted to say I'm now joined in the studio by Dr. Edward Chesney, who specialises in the study of cannabis-induced psychosis at King's College London. Welcome to the show, Dr. Chesney.
Thank you.
So you have conducted an in-depth study into psychosis, the use of cannabis, and in particular, fascinating, the effect of strong marijuana on young brains. In your opinion, is it a wise idea to decriminalise something that could carry so much potential risk?
I think the questions about decriminalisation are very complex, but one of the main risks is it might increase teenage use, and that's the thing I'm most concerned about. The links between teenage cannabis use, particularly heavy cannabis use, and developing schizophrenia or another psychosis in the 20s are quite clear, and we think the relationship is probably causal. So I am quite concerned about that.
So a causal factor between teenagers, particularly taking cannabis, and today's cannabis, by the way, is nothing like the spliff that people might have enjoyed back, Liberal Labour supporters back in the 90s. Today's drugs are incredibly strong, they're incredibly powerful, and the data here, a study from the University of Toronto, 11 times more risk of developing a psychotic disorder among teenagers who used cannabis compared with those who did not.
Yeah, and that Canadian study is very concerning. The 11 times risk is very high, and it's one of the highest estimates we've seen. But I think you have to consider the other factors involved in these studies. That is the direct relationship between cannabis use and developing psychosis or schizophrenia. But there are other factors. People who are more likely to use cannabis are also more likely to have other risk factors for developing schizophrenia, whether that's poverty, childhood stress, or the genetics of schizophrenia too. So I think those estimates are probably overestimates, and the risks aren't quite so high.
But in terms of those who present, because you also work in A&E,
yeah.
You treat people who come into hospitals, often in a very distressed situation, those with psychotic incidents and psychotic conditions. How many of them would you estimate are cannabis users?
It's difficult to know, but I think about a third of people, when they develop a psychotic illness, have a problem with cannabis use at the onset of the illness. And we always tell them that you need to reduce and hopefully stop your drug use. And we do see some people reduce. So in established illnesses, it reduces from about a third down to about 1 in 5, 20%. So we do make some progress, but a lot of people do continue to use cannabis over time. And we see that those people are more likely to relapse, to end up in hospital, to need more medications. The outcomes are generally worse.
Is, in your mind, there any causation? Is there evidence to show that ordinary people who started a cannabis habit developed psychosis? Did they have it before? Does it exacerbate an underlying condition? Tell me about some of the detail there.
I think cannabis is always one of many factors. There's many people in the UK who smoke cannabis every day and are completely fine.
Yeah.
It's just a minority who do go on to develop illnesses like schizophrenia and psychotic illnesses. So you have to have maybe some sort of genetic propensity or other environmental factors which together make you develop the illness.
When you look at a city such as London, let's face it, it has a large amount of social deprivation, a large amount of let's face it, of cultural influence. You walk around the streets of London, where you live, where I live, we live very close to each other. You can smell puff everywhere you go.
You can. I saw someone on the way into the studio.
Yeah, I mean, literally outside Parliament.
Yeah.
You can. Maybe people are defiantly having a spliff to put two fingers up to the government. The fact remains, Dr. Chesney, it is everywhere. It is everywhere, and so there is an argument to say that decriminalising small amounts frees up police time. And I believe there is evidence in other countries that does help the police to tackle tougher crime.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that's the argument that Sadiq Khan's making, that while I'm sure he accepts that there are risks of particularly teenage cannabis use, the benefits of criminalisation of use may be worse than the harms. So I think, it may free up more police to have more time to focus on other crimes, more violent crimes, for example. There's also a lot of people in disadvantaged groups in London, particularly black people, who complain they feel that they're targeted by the police and that stop and search and possession of small amounts of cannabis are used to target them unfairly.
What about the long-held conviction? There's a gateway factor. So, for example, you start off having a spliff or two and you find yourself getting onto harder drugs, specifically in terms of the patients you encounter who have violent psychosis. What's their relationship between cannabis and other drugs?
I'm not sure about those arguments. That's been a topic which people have debated and have been studied into for many years, and it's very hard to tell if cannabis is a gateway drug. I think generally most scientists don't think that is the case.
When we look at places such as Portugal, that are held up as bastions of liberalisation, decriminalise everything, medicalise rather than criminalise. But there are also incidents such as in America, in San Francisco, in California, in Portland, where we've seen parts of those countries turn into hellholes, where addicts become cripplingly addicted, social problems go through the roof, and of course the drug dealers swarm in to prey on the vulnerable. Are you concerned at all that a baby step, if you like, towards a partial decriminalisation could lead towards more pressure to go much more open, and that could have a profound effect on the fabric of society?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think in states like Oregon, where it's completely decriminalised and legalised, what's happened there hasn't been good at all. They, I think, said they used a Portuguese model, but I think they were a lot more liberal than what the Portuguese were. And if you look at the Portuguese system, I think a lot of people argue that they've actually had relatively good outcomes from that.
What about Sadiq Khan mentioned, because he visited California, and one thing that caught his eye was the fact that it's taxed and it can become a huge source of revenue. Millions and millions of dollars can be made from legalised drugs, which could be spent on helping patients, but it could just also be another form of tax. We live in a London, potentially, where it's illegal for your exhaust to smoke through ULEZ, but it'd be legal for you to smoke marijuana. Could this be, I don't know, compassionate politics, actually dressing up the fact it's just another tax vehicle?
That's an interesting point. I think if we were to legalise cannabis, I think the tax revenues, I'd be very happy with them. That would definitely be a benefit. But I don't think that should be one of the main reasons that we go to that kind of model. Specifically
about the patients you've seen and looking at the policies on the table, you work at the sharp end, you meet some very, very distressed people, psychotic patients. As I said, I've become close to the Valdo Calacane family. They're the victims of them, Barnaby Webber's mother and Grace O'Malley Kumar's parents. They were desperately upset by the fact that there was no toxicology tests carried out on Valdo Calacane, despite they claim an abundance of proof that he'd been taking strong marijuana before the incident. we have another problem there, don't we? People who care in the community, who are meant to be taking antipsychotic, anti-schizophrenic drugs, they're not taking them, they're not being monitored, and they can self-medicate. Are you concerned that with patients like that, patients almost like on the edge, that the free availability of cannabis could be a trigger factor that might tip them over the edge?
I mean, the first point I make about that is that the vast majority of people with psychotic illness or schizophrenia aren't violent. There are a very small minority, a few thousand people who end up in forensic hospitals, but there are hundreds of thousands of people in the UK with schizophrenia who've never committed a violent act in their life. But of course, there are these extreme cases like the Valdo Calcaine case. In his case, I've only read the official report and it doesn't mention drug use or cannabis at all. Perhaps that did occur, I don't know. But the report is quite clear that, and it points the blame at mental health services there. He's a man who had, I think, 4 relapses in just 2 years, and all 4 of those were associated with violent behaviour, and the police were involved too. And then, because he wasn't engaging in treatment, he was discharged to his GP, and that's when the tragic events and the murders happened. So I think, from at least from the official reports, it looks like mental health services were to blame there. I don't think that means we should point the finger and identify individuals. We need to look at more systemic issues. And mental health services, I've been working in the NHS services for 10 years. We are struggling. We haven't got enough money to cope at the moment.
But the big question is, the final question to you tonight, Dr. Edward Chesney, with all your experience of treating psychosis, with all your observational data, all the studies about the link between marijuana use and psychosis, do you think that the more liberal approach could increase your caseload, could increase problems?
I think it could, but it also may not. I think we need to wait and see what happens if Sadiq Khan's policy does get put into practice, and we need to look at the potential benefits of it and the potential harms and consider in 5 or 10 years if it's been worthwhile.
Excellent stuff. Thank you for your expertise. Fascinating stuff, Dr. Edward Chesney. Thank you for joining me on the show tonight. Now, moving on, coming up next, could former Reform MP Rupert Lowe be plotting to bring down Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch with Robert Jenrick, who is rumoured to be her replacement? Well, the two had an illicit tryst. We'll be hearing straight from the horse's mouth next. You will not want to miss it. Rupert Lowe on the show next.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Are these two things linked? Is an excess of belly fat perhaps hindering our children's education?
Good morning. So you're quite right. It's not the actual belly fat that is causing the brain problem. It's more that what causes the belly fat to exist is also causing issues in the brain, essentially. So the belly fat is almost a side effect, and so is the reduced learning, the memory, the mood issues that we're seeing in the brain. So it's very important to understand that those two things are correlated, and actually the problems that go behind it are what we need to target. It's not just about, we're not just trying to body shame young people, we're actually trying to look at what are the cofactors, essentially. So that could be sleep, lack of exercise, overuse of technology, loneliness, would you believe it? And of course, diet.
The headline essentially has run away with itself. It's conflating the two and making it sound like belly fat is an issue for our children's education, when in reality, it's a matter of actually we need to be encouraging healthier habits, a better diet, more sleep, as you mentioned, loneliness, for example. Is it healthy, though, for these headlines to suggest, like you said, potential for body shaming, potential for, parents getting the wrong impression? Is that what the real issue here is?
I mean, everything has a positive and a negative side. If any parent looks at this and thinks, oh my gosh, I'm seeing my child is getting a little bit podgier around the middle. I need to do something, and kicks them into action. And same with children. You know, it's not a bad idea to inform them and educate them about diet and exercise. And it's good to know about those things.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back to GB News Tonight with me, your host, Martin Daubney. Now, before the break, we were discussing Sadiq Khan's plan to potentially decriminalise, partially legalise the use of cannabis in Britain and in London. Ian says this: I know the dangers of cannabis and have witnessed some of them at first hand. What seems to be missing from the present conversation is the medicinal uses of cannabis for conditions like multiple sclerosis. It is very difficult for patients to get legally prescribed cannabis in this country, and for some, nothing else will work. And of course, that forces them into the hands of the drug dealers. And Peter adds this, quite simply to the point: if Sadiq Khan wants it, it must be a bad idea. Now, welcome back to the show. Now, could the former Reform MP, Rupert Lowe, be planning on joining the Conservative Party? Well, the former Reform MP is said to be open to joining the Tories following a private meeting with senior Conservative Robert Jenrick last week. And the two met at a Mayfair club to discuss Lowe's potential political future. Now, to do so would mark a sharp turn from Mr Lowe's recent talk of launching his own political party. And the talks come just days before fresh tensions erupted around party leader Kemi Badenoch, with reports of plots to unseat her already swirling. So, would Mr Rupert Lowe join the Conservatives, and would that be a help or a hindrance? Well, let's talk to the man himself. I'm now joined by Rupert Lowe, the MP for Great Yarmouth. Rupert, a pleasure to have your company. Been way too long. Rupert Lowe, we love a plot in politics. We love a tryst, an illicit meeting. You met with Robert Jenrick. What was on the menu?
Well, look, Martin, it's a pleasure to be back with my old ex-MEP colleague from the West Midlands. It's been some time since there was an attempted political assassination attempt against me, which could have landed me in prison with no basis to it. But anyway, here I am. I'm in rude health. I'm actually enjoying a bit of a parliamentary recess, getting a dose of reality down in the country, and keeping my feet firmly on the ground. And out of the what I call loony bin of Parliament. But look, I mean, I had lunch with Robert Jenrick probably 3 months ago at my club, and I simply had lunch with him at his club. I've always said, since my political assassination, which was very clumsy and arguably somewhat unchristian, I have all options open. And I have to confess, I was not expecting to be politically taken out like a sort of wing forward takes out the scrum half if he can. But I'm now free. I've got lots of options open to me. I'm not plotting to do any badness to anybody else. What I'm intent on doing, and I think I've made this clear, is changing the way Britain's governed by 2029. And I've now got to turn my mind to finding a way to do that. I personally, having witnessed, having come from the real world and having now witnessed the way Parliament operates, the way the civil service operates, the way the front bench operates, the way the Labour government is basically surrendering vast tracts of British sovereign territory with absolutely, almost with a smile on their faces. They speak with forked tongue. So I think collectively, the British people who care about the country have to now find a solution to changing the way we're governed by 2029. And that's what I'm turning my mind to. So talking to the Tories, I talked to all the Tories a lot. They knew that the attempt to politically assassinate me was a farce.
Okay,
So rather than being,
Rupert, can we stop dwelling on that, please? You've made that point now about 5 times.
But rather than being cold-shouldered, Martin, I've been talking to them. There's some great young Tories, but...
And let's talk about what that might look like. You've been quite critical of the Conservatives in the past, although you are naturally a Conservative by heritage. What is it? Is there anything particular about Robert Jenrick that's caught your eye as a kind of man you might like to work with?
Well, I think there are some very able Tories. A lot of them are young. I mean, I've got huge amounts of admiration for Jack Rankin, for Katie Lamb, some of the young Tories, but there is this overhang of Cameronite, what I call Lib Dems. So as I said to Robert, and I think Robert he's a bit like a sort of Catholic convert. He's almost more Catholic than the Catholics now, because he, as you know, voted to Remain, and he did all sorts of things that I wouldn't approve of. But I think we've got to find somehow a collective solution. And what that means, and what I've been trying to do, is effectively unite right-wing thought through policy. And that was my issue. We need policy, Martin. We have to have a plan. We have to have, if you like, a detailed roadmap to changing the way we're governed. And that's not going to happen by just what I call shallow rhetoric. That's got to happen by plan. So I'm now exploring all options. All options are open, Martin. That's the message.
And Rupert, there was some polling out today that we carried on GB News showing that Kemi Badenoch in the Red Wall is less popular than Jeremy Corbyn. I think only 7% of the electorate in the Red Wall said that they thought Kemi Badenoch could be the most effective Prime Minister in the land, way below Boris Johnson, way below Sir Keir Starmer. Is the direction of travel with the Conservative Party, you think, is it more suited to having a leader such as Robert Jenrick? And might you like to see that? Might you like to help Robert Jenrick to become the leader of the Conservative Party?
Look, I said all options are open, Martin. I think even I appeared in that poll, quite incredibly. I don't think I appeared on the list, so I must have been an unprompted appearer. I think I ended up with 6% in that poll, which is quite extraordinary. But anyway... Look, I'm not really interested in anything other than changing the way we're governed, and I've got to find that solution. And I've got to somehow then explain what needs to be done to the British people and give them an opportunity if they agree to vote for it. Now, I was hoping to do that within Reform, but that hasn't been possible. So now I have to turn my mind to doing it a different way, and that's what I'm doing. But I'm not in any great hurry. I think... you know, as better men than myself say, time spent in reconnaissance is seldom wasted. And I think that certainly applies now, because whatever happens now, it's very important that we get it right.
And Rupert Lowe, finally, the Conservative Party, you've been very critical of, certainly in terms of its open borders situation, a failure to take back control of our borders, letting 1 million people in under Boris Johnson's watch. You've been very, very critical about that. Why would you even consider joining a party like that? You've had nothing but bad words to say about them on that particular topic of open borders.
Look, Martin, they've failed us badly. I'm on public record as saying that with an 80-seat majority, which people like you and I helped gift them, they singularly failed to deliver what they should have delivered. But that's because their MPs were selected on quotas, not on merit. Now, that's sadly water under the bridge, because with an 80-seat majority, what you and I could do, Martin, would be quite substantial, and it needed to start on day one after the election, which it didn't. And yeah, I blame Boris for that. I blame a lot of the front bench for that, and I think that's why it's very difficult for the Tories to actually impugn Keir Starmer, because a lot of the things they accuse him of, they were guilty of. So, you know, legal migration was huge. Illegal migration was far too high. The number of people living here illegally was far too high. So there are lots of systemic failures, and I blame the Uniparty for that. What I have said, though, and I maintain this, is that a reformed Tory party with its history is arguably the most effective vehicle through which to change the way we're governed. Now, if that isn't possible, we have to find a force from outside the Uniparty which it acts as an agent either directly or indirectly to unite those people who want their country back. And let me tell you, Martin, there are more and more people who now want their country back. They can see where it's all gone wrong. I've always said the British people are very phlegmatic, Martin, but they're turning. Look at the polls, they're turning.
They are. Rupert, can I just push you, if the Conservative Party, as you say, has a chance of uniting, of coalescing around a more conservative core, do you think they need a new leader? Is Kemi Badenoch ill-equipped to lead that reformed Conservative Party?
Well, I'm not in a position to judge whether Kemi Badenoch is right or wrong for the Tory party. What I, as I said, have got to do, Martin, is find a solution to the problem. And it's up to them who they choose as their leader. I'm not part of the Tory party. As I said to you, I talk to a lot of them. I think I have changed quite a lot of the philosophy in Parliament, whether it comes to the Pakistani rape gangs, whether it comes to mass deportation, which I think we have to do of illegals, and those living here, those arriving, criminals in our prisons. I've advocated mass deportation and a lack of any
Rupert,
form of acceptance of that.
Could I just push you on that point? Do you think some of those opinions might be too spicy for the Conservative Party? Might they not have you on that basis?
I think the Overton window is moving, Martin. So I think it's moving across Parliament. And I think the Overton window, as you know, is moved by what the British people want. Because if you don't give the British people what they want, you don't get elected. And I push those boundaries because I think we voted in 2016 for our own sovereign borders. And clearly we haven't got them. And that's because the British establishment has got this sort of weird view that we can't deport people who arrive here illegally. Well, we can now. We left the European Union, and it's now up to us as a sovereign nation to exercise and deliver what is in the best interests of the honest, decent, tax-paying electorate.
OK, Rupert Lowe, we have to leave it there. The MP for Great Yarmouth, a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much for joining us on GB News Tonight. Rupert Lowe.
Pleasure, Martin.
Cheers, mate. Now, for the break, I'll be speaking with a human rights lawyer who changed his mind entirely on trans rights and was totally ostracised for doing so by the so-called Be Nice Brigade. Stay with us.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. After a day of sunshine and showers, it'll eventually turn dry into this evening. Only for a time, though, a return of some wet and windy weather from the west, leading us into an unsettled day tomorrow. But for the time being, a ridge of high pressure largely easing away any showers, but outbreaks of rain soon moving their way into Northern Ireland for the first part of the evening and eventually into western parts of England and Scotland, and turning quite heavy at times, particularly across western areas, and quite blustery too, particularly around exposed coasts of Scotland. But even elsewhere across England and Wales, it's going to be quite a damp and dank start to the day. But with the cloud outbreaks of rain, that does mean it's going to keep temperatures up, so it should be still quite a mild start to the day. And I'm afraid the outbreaks of rain are set to continue for much of the day as well, particularly across Scotland, where still it's going to turn heavy and still quite blustery at times through the course of the morning. Fairly similar across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, quite a wet start and some quite low cloud, leading to quite a misty, murky start, and fairly similar elsewhere across England and Wales, particularly western parts of Wales, parts of Devon and Cornwall, some damp areas to start here. And it's set to continue through much of the day, still some quite heavy and blustery outbreaks, particularly across Scotland. Those central areas, parts of the southeast, any rain should eventually ease away, but it's still likely to remain quite cloudy. But it's still going to be fairly warm, highs just about reaching the low 20s across the southeast, and it's still not going to be particularly cold either across the north, though obviously it's going to be quite a wet afternoon. Then heading into Friday, not quite as much rain, but it's still going to be damp at times. This system slowly sinking its way southward, leading us to some drizzly outbreaks and potentially turning a little bit brighter across Scotland, Northern Ireland, though still a risk of showers here. But it's going to feel quite warm, quite humid, and it's likely we'll see further outbreaks of rain, particularly on Saturday across northern areas, and still temperatures across the south in the low 20s.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off-limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as
and now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nigel is back.
Good evening.
Unfiltered.
Are these proposals bold enough?
Uncompromising.
Will it bring growth?
Unmissable.
We as a country are brilliant.
Nigel Farage returns this Tuesday from 7 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Tonight with me, Martin Daubney. Now, this evening at 9 p.m, it's the one and only, it's the Patrick Christys Tonight Show, and the star of that show joins me now. Patrick, you're a one-off. What's on your show?
Thank you very much, Martin. Yes, indeed. Well, we've got loads on, so I'm having a look at Sadiq Khan's desire to essentially turn London into a dope-smoking haven. I am asking whether or not this is actually the right thing to do, or really, is there some underlying reason why he might want to do it? So I've got a couple of theories. I'm going to be lobbing those out there at 9 p.m. A couple of other things on as well. I've got a back catalogue of all of the times that we've had foreign or asylum seeker offenders where police forces have not released their ethnicity and nationality or banned us from reporting on it until a court case, comparing and contrasting, of course, what's going on in Liverpool. And is 72 years old too old to have a baby? Is it actually child abuse if you're that old and you bring a child into the world? All of that and, of course, much more, Martin. I'll see you at 9.
Well, I'm not quite 72 yet, Patrick, but I'll tell you what, the thing I love about your show, seriously, you've got all day to plan this meticulously, go through the evidence, go through the data, load the chamber, boof. Excellent show.
That's
Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 till 11. See you later, mate. Now, moving on, a leading human rights lawyer and King's College professor says that he no longer supports key demands of the transgender rights movement. Robert Wintermute, once a strong trans rights advocate, now argues that the demands of the trans rights movement conflict with women's rights. Now, the backlash to him has been fierce, with former allies cutting ties and students violently protesting against his talk. So I'm delighted to say I'm now joined by that man in the studio here in Westminster, and that is Robert Wintermute. Robert, a pleasure to have your company. Pardon the pun, but you've transitioned yourself. Your opinion has completely changed from being a trans advocate to, if you like, seeing the light. Tell me about your journey.
Well, I could say it actually started at McGill University in Montreal, where I studied law. There's an inscription above one of the entrances, a Latin maxim, which is Audi alterum partem. Hear the other side, listen to the other side. So basically, I only heard from one side for many years. I heard the transgender side.
Yeah.
Everything that was proposed sounded reasonable to me. I'm a man. I wasn't thinking about how this might affect women-only spaces.
Yeah.
And I just went along with it for many years. And so the first time I had a bit of doubt was in 2015. I heard about Ireland's new law on self-identification.
Yeah.
And I asked myself, what does this mean for sports? Does this mean Usain Bolt, when he slows down, he can move to the women's 100 meters? But then I put that aside. And in 2018, I was in a summer school where there was a transgender student who made it clear that he did not seem to understand that women have human rights too. And that's what I call my light bulb moment.
Because, of course, it then became a case that it wasn't about equality, it was about special treatment. I think we've got a quick clip of one of those violent protests that you underwent. Let's put that on now.
Can I go in, please?
Get out!
Can you go in?
34 years at King's College.
Robert, just seeing that clip there, a great many people say, you're obviously a good bloke. You know, you're a human rights lawyer, you care deeply, you've got compassion, you've got humanity. Suddenly you're being othered, you're being treated like a Nazi, like a fascist. It must have been incredibly distressing for you.
Well, the problem was summed up by the slogan that the students were chanting outside the seminar room, which was, F your system, F your hate, trans rights aren't up for debate.
Well, everything should be up for debate.
Everything is up for debate. Actually, when I started thinking about it, I thought, well, maybe some things are absolute, like the right to be free from torture and inhuman and degrading treatment.
Of course.
And then I thought, well, wait a minute, you have to define those concepts. And there was a European Court of Human Rights case about whether a police officer slapping a teenager once on the face was prohibited treatment. So everything has to be debated because the rights have limits and you have to decide where the limits are.
We've seen the Supreme Court in the United Kingdom decide, no, a woman is a woman, biological, immutable characteristics. Science agrees, the law agrees. Clearly, a lot of young people don't agree. What's going on? We hear a lot about the fact, are young people being brainwashed? Are they so imbibed in this? They have become the precise thing they accuse others of. They're bigoted, they're intolerant, they are totally unopen to any form of critical analysis of their ideology.
Yes, I think it's a fairly recent phenomenon. Partly for this younger generation, transgender rights is the cause of their time. So we got same-sex marriage in 2013 in England and Wales, 2015 across the USA. There was a kind of vacuum there, and transgender rights has filled it. But people just haven't thought about the limits. There's if you say trans rights are human rights, they tend to think, well, that's absolute. Everything they propose must be accepted.
Are we, do you think, going through a moment, you've had your awakening, the legal system is having its awakening. I think the general public can see it's just patently and provably unfair to see a biological man beating up a woman in a sports event. There's legitimised, it's televised, it's Olympics. Have we reached a point where you think there's going to be an awakening and more people will make your journey and the light bulb will go off and the trans movement will be put back in its box?
I think what's happening is, well, the legal system has been clarified, or the law has been clarified, based on biology and what makes the acts of parliament work together. But what we're also seeing is politicians, I'd say, catching up with the public. So there's been a promotion of the idea for about 10 years now that trans women are women and birth sex is irrelevant. If someone identifies as a woman, that's enough. And most people don't accept that, particularly in a situation like sports that you mentioned. And now the leaders of the Labour and Conservative parties agree about this.
Well, at least they do superficially. They still can't seem to come to a consensus on that. Look, it's been fascinating speaking to you. Thank you very much for joining us tonight on the show. That is Robert Wintermute. Brilliant stuff. Now, thank you, Robert. And coming up next, a Labour councillor ties himself in knots, claiming that shirt and tie dress codes are racist.
By standard attire, a suit, a collar and tie. That would be inappropriate attire for those people, and they would find it extremely offensive.
You are displaying the reason the public are hating Labour right now. I suggest you grow up and stop making everything so divisive.
Utterly absurd, and I'll be joined by the Reform councillor who called him out, and that's next.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
Whilst eastern parts of Europe are having some further heavy rain causing some issues here, it's a different story further west. A largely settled picture, a few showery bursts perhaps affecting the Canaries, but likely to avoid most of these. Also largely dry on Thursday across much of Spain and Portugal. A large chunk of Italy having a fine picture, but still some showery rain towards the east, and then a very wet story across more eastern parts, across Greece and Turkey, for example. See you later.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we are in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christys Tonight show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays, I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christys Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back to GB News Tonight with me, your host, Martin Daubney. Now, a Labour Party councillor has sparked controversy by urging North Lincolnshire Council to revise its dress code for public meetings, arguing that requiring a shirt and tie could be offensive to certain ethnic and religious groups.
What do we mean by correct attire? Because we have got to recognise that in this area, we have now got more ethnicity, more religious groupings that are not what we would call the white ethnic groupings. If we mean by standard attire, a suit, a collar and tie, that would be inappropriate attire for those people, and they would find it extremely offensive.
It's not April the 1st. I'm very pleased now to be joined by the very Reform Councillor himself, Oliver Freeston, Reform UK Councillor for North East Lincolnshire. Oliver, welcome to the show. Some people might be listening to that and just think this is a clown world. This isn't happening. It did happen. There was a man, I'm assuming a white man, white-splaining that shirts, collars and ties are racist. What on earth is going on?
Honestly, it makes you want to rip your hair out. Now, imagine having the misfortune of having to sit through a council meeting and listen to this absolute nonsense. Although I suppose it's true. If they're going to govern like clowns, then why wouldn't they dress like them? It's embarrassing. You know, we've got a white man being offended on behalf of different ethnicities. But when you actually speak to them and you say, is there any reason you couldn't wear a shirt and tie? They go, absolutely not. So actually, I would say that it's quite offensive to say that certain ethnicities can't wear a shirt and tie. Absolute nonsense.
Of course it is. I mean, it's a standard dress code. It's a code of conduct. It's a code of decorum. It's a code to show that you're ready for work and businesslike. And we happen to be in the United Kingdom. What's his plan B? What, you dress in a sari?
You tell me. I don't know what they're going to turn up in next. But what I can tell you, if I was the chair of the meeting, because it's at the chair's discretion, if anybody turned up without good reason, I would tell them to leave the meeting. End of story, because we've been elected by our constituents. If you can't be bothered to put a shirt and tie on and show the respect to the people who've put you there, then don't bother coming. Now, of course, there are exceptions. There's people who an emergency has come up or they've got back from work later than they expected. Fair enough, we'll make exceptions as one-off. But to make it a blanket rule of dressing however you like, absolutely ridiculous and shameful.
Yeah, I mean, you could be like Justin Trudeau. You could wear a pair of green Adidas trainers to meet the king. I mean, there is a certain contagion to this lack of dress code. But on a serious point, you know, nobody is saying that it should be mandatory to wear, you know, to strip out your cultural origins, to comply. It isn't that. This isn't this idea of like a French style, no wearing of any religious attire. This is a straightforward him taking offence on behalf of somebody else who, I mean, has anybody ever complained about this in the past in this council?
And that's the exact thing that was discussed on the night. Nobody had ever made a problem over it. But the sad thing is, I was the lone voice in the chamber to say this is absolute rubbish. So afterwards, they said, OK, we'll take a vote on whether to send this back to a working group to review the wording to see if it is offensive and whether it's fit for purpose. I said, well, let's make it a recorded vote. I was the sole councillor out of all of them that said, nonsense, let's plough ahead. The Tories joined forces with them, and that's why they're currently unelectable, both parties.
And what is that about? Is it just a total fear, a total lack of a backbone? They just want to keep their heads down. But see, the problem with that is that as soon as you just keep silent, this becomes the new norm. How long before anybody just could turn up in anything they want to work? And you know, that is not the way we conduct business in this country.
Exactly that. People are scared of being offensive, and that's why I love being part of Reform. I make no qualms about it. I used to be a Conservative. I joined Reform when we were polling 8-9% in the party because I believed in the party's principles and and the convictions, and I had the courage to join. But we've certainly got to stand up and we've got to fight back this nonsense. The fact that Reform are polling so well now shows that actually we've got the majority or a good swathe of the country behind us. What I would say, though, is I don't think the majority of the public are actually aware of the conduct of their elected members. Most people don't know who their local councillor is, and so they don't know what's being said. Although I suspect if the electorate were aware of the comments that were made by this certain councillor, he would be getting booted out of office and it wouldn't be too soon. And the interesting thing is, he's actually a ward colleague of mine. He's another councillor. I can tell you next year I'm up for election. We're going to really work hard and we're going to be delivering the message that Reform is the serious party.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think one of the things we're going to see now about so many Reform councillors out there, so many Reform councils being taken over by Reform, more and more of these kind of stories coming out. And I think maybe that's what the general public needs, just to sort of have the sunlight, the bleach of sunlight to show us what's going on. That's what I did when we were in the European Union, just expose their cocktail parties, their foreign jaunts, the wastage, the £5,000 leather armchairs. That's your job. Thanks for joining us, Oliver Freeson. Thanks for joining us on the show. Now, we contacted the Labour councillor in question for a comment, and we haven't received one yet. Now, don't forget, you can save us all day, not just on TV, but on your radio, on your smart speakers. To listen to us on your smart speakers, simply say, play GB News on TuneIn. Up next is State of the Nation with Matt Goodwin. Matt, what's on your menu?
Well, welcome to Soft Touch Britain, Martin. We're going to be talking to police officials about these crazy Labour proposals to basically make life easier, not harder for criminals. We're going to be going to the stateside tonight, hearing from somebody in America about Donald Trump's war on the university. Should we be doing something similar in the UK? We've got more millionaires and billionaires leaving the UK than any other country except Russia. We're going to be talking about why, and are we now finally seeing the death of the Tory party? We're going to be talking to a top pollster about that tonight.
Wow, and I wonder what that will reveal. Matt Goodwin, sounds like an excellent show as ever. Please stick with us. Matt Goodwin next, State of the Nation. I'll be back tomorrow, 3 till 6 p.m. Have a fabulous evening. Stick around for this fella. It's going to be fabulous. First, though, here is your weather, and here's Honor Christys.
There'll be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. After a day of sunshine and showers, it'll eventually turn dry into this evening. Only for a time though, a return of some wet and windy weather from the west, leading us into an unsettled day tomorrow. But for the time being, a ridge of high pressure largely easing away any showers, but outbreaks of rain soon moving their way into Northern Ireland for the first part of the evening and eventually into western parts of England and Scotland, and turning quite heavy at times, particularly across western areas, and quite blustery too, particularly around exposed coasts of Scotland. But even elsewhere across England and Wales, it's going to be quite a damp and dank start to the day. But with the cloud outbreaks of rain, that does mean it's going to keep temperatures up, so it should be still quite a mild start to the day. And I'm afraid the outbreaks of rain are set to continue for much of the day as well, particularly across Scotland, where still it's going to turn heavy and still quite blustery at times through the course of the morning. Fairly similar across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, quite a wet start and some quite low cloud, leading to quite a misty, murky start, and fairly similar elsewhere across England and Wales, particularly western parts of Wales, parts of Devon and Cornwall, some damp areas to start here. And it's set to continue through much of the day, still some quite heavy and blustery outbreaks, particularly across Scotland. Those central areas, parts of the southeast, any rain should eventually ease away, but it's still likely to remain quite cloudy, but it's still going to be fairly warm. Highs just about reaching the low 20s across the southeast, and it's still not going to be particularly cold either across the north, though obviously it's going to be quite a wet afternoon. Then heading into Friday, not quite as much rain, but it's still going to be damp at times. This system slowly sinking its way southward, leading us to some drizzly outbreaks and potentially turning a little bit brighter across Scotland, Northern Ireland, though still a risk of showers here. But it's going to feel quite warm, quite humid, and it's likely we'll see further outbreaks of rain, particularly on Saturday across northern areas, and still temperatures across the south in the low 20s.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be driving away with this brand new Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. It comfortably sleeps 4, comes with skyroof, integrated kitchen and bathroom, and is worth over £67,000. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that wherever this motorhome takes you, it takes you there in style. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entry start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and